Hello, hello. This is Troy Black, and this is Filibusted Headlines. And today we are going to be covering the collapse of the Dutch government. So, as you can see in this photo here, the tulips are on fire. No, that's a joke. We're not talking about this kind of collapse today. Thank God the tulips are still alive and still okay, hopefully. All right, we're talking about the Dutch government collapses after far-right party leaves coalition over immigration proposals. So this is a picture of Geert Wilders. He's the leader of the far-right Party for Freedom, the PVV, and he announced his party's exit from the Dutch coalition government today due to disagreements over asylum policy. And I'm going to get into why this is important in a few minutes. Specifically, the coalition's refusal to sign off on PVV's strict asylum plans. Tongue twister early in the morning here. All right. It has been called the strictest asylum policy in Dutch history by its critics, but I'm sure that those in favor of the policy would also call it the strictest asylum policy in Dutch history, and for good reason, because the Netherlands has a crisis on its hands, like much of Europe at the moment. So we're going to get into that in a minute, but the Netherlands actually has a unique political system shaped by what some might call a culture of consensus. So if you want to think about it like this, when me and my wife get in the car with our kids and we're trying to decide where to eat, and we're saying, where do y'all want to eat? One of them wants Mexican food. One of them wants Italian. One of them wants Chinese food. One of them wants burgers and shakes. And me and Leslie don't want any of that, right? And so there's no consensus. And so where do we end up going? We end up going to somewhere nobody wants to go, or we don't go anywhere at all and we all go home mad, right? Or what family movie do you want to watch on family movie night? And you sit there and you argue for 2 hours and then you don't end up watching a movie. That's essentially how this government works. And these coalitions take months and months to put together after an election takes place. So the House, they have a House and they have a Senate. The House creates the legislation. The Senate essentially signs off or vetoes the legislation. And they are actually made up. It's very different from the United States government. They're made up by many different parties, and often 10 to 15. And the reason is because they have a proportional representational system where they kind of give everybody a voice, and it depends on how much of the vote they got. But as a result of that, coalitions are vital. So they have to essentially, people with differing views and landing on different sides of an issue have to be able to work together, or else they'll never get anything done. That's why it's so critical that a coalition work and not fail. And that's why people are going nuts right now based on what has just taken place. So the current coalition, listen to this number. The current coalition took 7.5 months to form after the November 2023 election. 7.5 months washed down the drain. That's insane. When coalitions fail, either the remaining parties form a new coalition, which is very unlikely here given the tensions, or the government collapses, leading to new elections. And another bit of news just came out this morning I'm about to share that makes this even crazier. So this is how news happens nowadays. This is how people find out about what's going on. Geert Wilders actually posted this on X this morning, very early this morning, 2:15 here in the States. And he says, and this has been translated, no signature for our asylum plans, no changes to the main outline agreement. PVV leaves the coalition. People are not happy about the way that he announced the fact that they were leaving. Look at what has taken place since then. Dutch Prime Minister Schoof steps down after Wilders quits the coalition. So things are getting worse and worse, it appears. However, there's a reason for this upset. There's a very good reason for this, and it's because Europe is facing a continental crisis at the moment. And this is what Prime Minister Schoof actually said leading up to a meeting this morning. Is it Tuesday? It is Tuesday. This morning, Tuesday morning, he talked about the enormous international challenges, and he talked about how they are actually facing a war on the European continent right now, and how this could lead to an economic crisis fallout. What war was he talking about? I believe he was talking about the mass migration problems that they're facing. And that is exactly what this coalition was trying to solve. And the reasons why this party, Geert Wilders' party, the PVV, pulled out and said, hey, if we can't get this done, if we can't fix the biggest issue, we don't want to be here because we know this is going downhill fast. So I'm not going to personally say whether or not he made the right decision or not. I don't know enough yet to make that claim, but I do know that Europe does have a big issue on its hands with mass migration. And as a Christian, I face this thing from two different perspectives. Number one is I want to love people, and if they need help, they need asylum, and there's a good reason for that. I want to be able to offer that. But at the same time, I'm not going to offer somebody asylum at the sake of the rights and the freedoms and the protection and security of the people in my own nation, right? The Bible says, if you don't take care of your own household, you're worse than an unbeliever. That's pretty clear, okay? But it also says to love the immigrant, right? To love those on the outside, right? So there is this place of common sense and love where we can meet together, and I believe we can make some serious change and make some good change, positive impact on the world. But at the same time, you're not going to open up your doors at night and let somebody in and let somebody come sleep in your house with your family that you don't know, and you're not sure what is going to take place, and you're not going to let your house be filled with people that you don't know, right? So that essentially is what has happened. We actually did a whole episode on this where we said, here's why Conor McGregor wants to rule Ireland. If y'all want to go watch, this is a shorter take from a longer exclusive episode. You can sign up for exclusive content and you can watch that full exclusive episode where we talk about how 70% of Ireland's young people have considered leaving the country of Ireland. Why? Mainly because of this mass migration issue taking place and how it's affected their economy, it's affected their jobs. And we've seen small towns in Ireland double in population overnight. Think about how a small town could deal with that amount of that influx of people. It can't. This is the same thing that's happening in the Netherlands. What they're trying to solve, it's the same thing that's happening across Europe and many nations. And this is where what's happened is love for humanity and humanitarian aid and fear of not doing the right thing comes together. And the government has tried to conflate love and fear. And anytime someone's trying to confuse you and you're not sure, am I loving or am I doing this out of love or out of fear? Guess what? You're being manipulated. And that's what's taking place here. So this is what has been said. It says governing the country is something different. So this is a critic of whatever his face is, Wilder's, not Gene Wilder, but that's where my brain goes. Geert Wilders. This is a critic of Geert Wilders saying governing the country is something different than threatening on social media. This is Caroline van der Plas, who's the leader of the Farmer Citizen Movement, which is actually an agrarian and right-wing populist party. So this is one of his friends saying this. And she said, this is completely irresponsible, reckless, and incomprehensible for anyone who hoped for change. So the fear involved here from the right-wing side is, hey, if you step down now, we're just going to give the left-wing parties more power, essentially, in the long run, and none of this is ever going to get changed. But he's obviously trying to make a statement, and he's saying, hey, this has gotten much bigger than anybody's realized. This is a big issue. We're going to talk about some of the problems happening here in the States involving this in a minute. But what he's doing now, this recklessness on social media, sounds a little bit like what Trump has been doing since the very beginning when he started to run for president back in 2016. Now, whether it's going to work in the Netherlands or not, we'll have to wait and see. I don't know if any good's going to come out of this or not. Possibly not. 2024 European Council of Foreign Relations study shows that 47% of EU citizens are prioritizing mass migration control over humanitarian obligations. And this has fueled the growth of far-right parties like the PVV. And there's a reason why. And we saw that those stats literally nearly doubled under a year from 2023 to 2024. In many nations across Europe. And there's a reason for it. It's because people are starting to wake up to what's really happening. And they're saying, hey, this is a problem. And we've been, it's like that frog in a pot who's slowly boiling. We've been slowly boiled. And suddenly we're waking up and our arms and our legs don't work anymore. We're trying to figure out what to do next. So crazy time that we're living in. This is what's taking place here in the States. Okay. Talking about mass migration to an extent, but also illegal immigration, which is slightly different. It's different when there's a policy saying, hey, we want this to happen, and the government's actually allowing it to happen and orchestrating it. There's a difference when that's taking place and when illegal immigrants are coming across the border and they're going against the policies of the nation. So largest ICE operation results in nearly 1,500 illegals arrested in blue state. So in Massachusetts, ICE has executed the largest ever roundup of illegal immigrants, arresting nearly 1,500 targeted criminals. This sting operation is called Operation Patriot, and it's focused on the arrest of illegals with terrible histories, things like murder, drug trafficking, predatory criminal charges, and other terrible charges. Of the arrests, 790 illegals had criminal convictions or charges, and 277 had deportation orders. So this is not a humanitarian crisis that's taking place right now. It's just following through with the law of the land and saying, hey, we don't want criminals on our streets. They arrested 1,500 people. Guess what? 790 of those had criminal convictions. Convictions. The operation included teams from other states and authorities from the FBI, DEA, and ATF. As part of the sweeping arrests near Boston, ICE apprehended an 18-year-old school student. So what we're seeing, and we're going to see more of this, ICE arrests of high school students sends shockwaves through a Massachusetts town. So we see people who are essentially protesting this and saying this is not right. But at the same time, where do we draw the line? This is the common sense question I would ask and say, hey, which laws are okay to break as a U.S. citizen, right? Though for those that are U.S. citizens, which laws are we allowed to break as U.S. citizens? We're not allowed to break the law. And when we break the law, we've got to face the consequences of that, or we've got to change the law so that we're not breaking the law, right? We've got to pass legislation that changes the law. And so the same applies to an illegal immigrant. The same applies to a legal immigrant. The same applies to me and my friends, right? The same applies to anyone. We've got to follow the law of the land, obviously, unless it's something that's immoral. In my case, I'm a Christian, something that goes against the Bible or God's word. But this is something that's not just moral and right, but it's the law, right? And so we've got to look at it from that perspective. Now, at the same time, does that mean we mistreat and abuse people, or work the system in a way we're not taking care of people, their natural born rights as a human? No, absolutely not. We need to take care of people, but at the same time, we also need to uphold the law. And if something about the law is wrong, we go about the legal right of changing that. We don't work our way around it. So Boston's ICE field officer, Patricia Hyde, held a news conference stating, when we go out into the community and we find others who are unlawfully here, we're going to arrest them. We've been completely transparent with that. So what happened was they were looking for this young man's father because he was in the country illegally, and they pulled over a vehicle thinking that it was his vehicle, but actually the son was driving, who happens to be an 18-year-old high school student. They arrested the son as well, or they arrested the son instead because they realized that he was in the country illegally. So Todd Lyons, acting ICE director, followed up with, he was driving that vehicle, but like any law enforcement officer, if you encounter someone who has a warrant or, like I said, is here illegally, we will take action on that. And then they go on to say his dad hasn't turned himself in yet, and his dad knows he's the target of it. So sad day. Seems like the dad should do the right thing if he's here illegally and turn himself in, especially now that his son is potentially facing deportation. Locals in Milford, MA, where De Silva was arrested, have been filling the streets with protests. Many prominent members actively seeking his release. So, again, this needs to happen through even if the right thing to do here it would be to release this young man. In some people's eyes, they would have to go through a due process of law, and they would have to do it a legal way. And I don't see any legal way to do that right now. So ICE has been extremely active over the past few months, making huge arrests all over the country, with the largest operations hitting areas like Sacramento, Tallahassee, Chicago, and New York. So the Trump administration is planning to conduct major immigration raids in 3 U.S. cities per week. And here's the thing. This is something that Donald Trump talked about. But what did he really say? He said we were going to be exporting millions and millions of illegal immigrants, right? And then now we come down to it. What are they actually doing? Most of the time, they're actively looking for those with criminal charges, and they're deportating the ones with the worst criminal histories, and they're trying to get the criminals off the streets. So we see that there was a lot of very strong rhetoric coming from Trump during his campaign, but now they're focusing on the ones who are actually causing U.S. citizens to be in danger, right? Which I think is a good thing. And sometimes it takes a lot of very strong rhetoric and, kind of pushing that line to get to a point where you're just doing the thing that makes sense and trying to protect your people. So when asked about a quota, border czar Tom Homan did not have a specific number, but instead replied that the goal was to get as many criminals as possible, which, guess what? That's always a good thing. It's always a good thing. Now, how you process criminals, how you deal with them, how you try to actually, if you've ever seen Dog the Bounty Hunter, there's one way to go about it, and then there's a better way to go about it. And so I think that is an area for improvement here in the United States. Penal system is to improve some of the methods that we try to go about actually getting people to change. So moving on, the Justice Department launches official investigation into Biden's Autopen. Wow, it's about time. Yesterday, the Justice Department staff were directed to investigate clemency granted by former President Joe Biden to Biden's family members and death row inmates. So if you haven't seen, we actually did a very long episode about Biden's Autopen where we talk about what was actually going on. And there were people from his own administration that were working in the White House every day who have come out and told the truth finally and said, yes, we noticed it. Somebody was using the Autopen that shouldn't have been. Things were looking fishy. We were all wondering whether these orders are actually coming from Biden or not, or if they're coming from this other individual that they all suspect was using the Autopen without permission. So if y'all haven't seen that episode, it's here on Filibusted. But the Justice Department Attorney Ed Martin expressed in an email that the investigation is focused on whether Biden was competent and whether others were taking advantage of him through use of the Autopen or other means. I think it's pretty obvious what was going on there. Whether or not Biden used the Autopen for the pardon specifically is currently unknown and technically allowed. So obviously he could use the Autopen, but the question is not, is he allowed to use the Autopen or not? Absolutely, he could do that. The question is, was he the one who was actually signing off and saying, hey, we're going to use this and we're going to sign this document, or is somebody else making that decision? And therein lies the problem. So the investigation is not necessarily focused on the Autopen use as much as the manipulation of a potentially fragile president. So he actually used the Autopen excessively, and that's a huge red flag. Last minute pardons from Biden included Dr. Fauci, I don't know. I've never taken enough interest in that person to actually look up how to pronounce his name. General Mark Milley and members of the House January 6th committee. It's unclear what the result of the investigation will be as the story continues to develop. But Trump has said, and you see here in this video, he said this Autopen will be one of the greatest scandals of all time. I love that. One of the greatest scandals of all time. Seems like we've had a lot of those lately. Last but not least, the Department of Homeland Security. I'm going to go back to the Netherlands on fire here. And this is just an illustrative photo for those wondering about the story of the government of the Netherlands collapsing. Department of Homeland Security Chief David Richardson is under fire for a comment he made recently. As the acting head of FEMA, Richardson held a staff briefing yesterday and made the comment, I didn't know the United States had a hurricane season. So pretty obvious that he's joking there. As he's the acting head of FEMA, it'd be pretty sad if you didn't know the United States had a hurricane season, right? So there's a little sarcasm in that statement. But the Democrats are quick to jump on the Trump-appointed director with comments from Chuck Schumer saying, I'm unaware of why he hasn't been fired yet. Representative Crockett saying this is what happens when you hire vibes over qualifications. And DHS spokesperson emailing a statement saying, despite mean-spirited attempts to falsely frame a joke as policy, there is no uncertainty about what FEMA will be doing this hurricane season. And then the statement said, FEMA, catch this is crazy. FEMA is laser focused on disaster response and protecting the American people. So probably not the best choice of words to use, considering the online theories about lasers and weather manipulation. It's just coming out and saying FEMA is laser focused on disaster response. Hey, I don't know if the theories are true or not. I don't have an opinion on it. I've not done the research, but I know they're there. And so if you're trying to shut down some online theories, you don't want to mix those words together. FEMA is laser focused on disaster response. Either way, whatever. I'm seriously considering painting my roof blue. Just for the sake of it, just in case. All right. I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I will see you